Our shuttle set down north of Mercy Crossing, under a low violet cloud deck, and rain that tapped the hull like thrown grit. Golgotha always looked wounded at dawn. The sky stayed bruised for hours after sunrise, colony lamps still burning in broken patches across the plains, while the black ridges to the south held their shape like broken teeth until the light climbed high enough to flatten them. I checked my rifle, thumbed the seal at my collar, and looked over the team one last time before the ramp dropped. Owen Price stood nearest the hatch, heavy shoulders under his pack, breeching satchel riding high between them like a second spine. Before a fight he always rolled his neck once left, once right, as if he were making sure the body planned to keep up with the rest of him. Tyler Beck sat on the bench with his medkit open across his knees, counting injectors with the kind of calm that comes from practice and fatigue worn smooth together. He always checked the labels twice. Once, he told me, the dead deserved accuracy too, and I had believed him. Grant Mercer kept one ear on the squad net and one eye on the drone case between his boots. A scuffed deck of cards stuck halfway out of his thigh pocket, corners furred from use. On the transfer up from Kessler Dock, he lost 4 hands in a row and laughed through all of them. Somewhere in the middle of that game, he told Owen, with no ceremony at all, that his brother had vanished in a frontier raid 9 years ago, and his mother still set a holiday plate for him. Leo Bishop rested with his head tipped toward the bulkhead, saving himself for the long walk in. He opened his eyes when I rose. A brass transit token moved between his knuckles, disappearing and returning. Owen had lost it to him in cards 2 nights earlier. Leo said he meant to hand it back when we got home, just so Owen would owe him again. Mercy Crossing waited just beyond the quarantine fence. Command had sealed the settlement 3 weeks earlier after a burst of coded traffic from the colony governor, one panicked relay from a local patrol, and then silence. By the time the reports reached our shuttle, they had hardened into 3 likely causes: insurgent hit, pathogen event, evacuation collapse. The briefing left no space for a 4th answer. Men stop naming certain things once they grow too large to answer. I tapped Grant's shoulder. You break through the local fog, you push priority straight to orbit. He nodded. If the blockers are still sector-wide, I can squeeze a burst from height or hardline. Try both. Owen slapped the side of the ramp as it came down. Chance is the kind word for this one. He liked to complain on the way in. It kept him warm, and it kept younger men from inventing grand thoughts about mission glory. Leo grinned at him for half a second, closed his fist around the token, and stood when the cold hit us. I stepped out first. Groundwater splashed around my boots. The plain around the shuttle held short blue grass, scattered stone, and the tall quarantine pylons that marked the dead zone boundary. Each pylon rose twice the height of a man and wore a ring of amber lights near the top. Every light burned steady. Amber meant sealed sector, passive watch, contamination risk still under review. My orders fit inside one sentence: cross the line, learn what happened, pull anyone still breathing, and leave behind something useful enough that Fleet Command would act before Golgotha lost another town. I had spoken to Erin 6 hours earlier while the shuttle refueled over Kessler Dock. Signal lag stretched her words. She was at home, trying to pin a paper crown of painted planets onto Nora's hair for the school ceremony next month. Nora was my niece, not my daughter. Erin borrowed family duties that way when she wanted home to feel fuller than the 2 of us, and an apartment with half our shelves empty. "You're still coming, right?" she asked. She made Saturn too big on purpose and wants an audience. "I'll make it." "You say that like a man promising weather." "Then I'll bring an umbrella." "Bring your own bones back, Mason." That was our line. Years earlier, she had said it after my second rescue drop on Antioch 9, when I came back with 1 knee wrapped and 2 ribs bound. Bring your own bones back. I carried that line with me as I crouched at the fence, clipped the local grid reader to the access plate, and watched a thin green bar climb across the screen. Grant knelt beside me and plugged a probe wire into the pylon housing. "Old colony protocol under occupation patchwork," he said. "Ugly marriage. Can you open it?" He gave me a dry look. "You asked the right man." The fence gap slid apart with a harsh metal grind. We crossed into Mercy Crossing single file, the amber ring above our heads held. Inside the line, the world changed by degrees so small they would have escaped anyone moving too fast. The road still carried lane paint. The drainage ditches still worked. A commuter truck sat in front of a row house with its side door open and a child seat locked in the back. Rainwater gathered on the vinyl and spilled over when the wind shook it. Porch lights still burned. Laundry lines were drawn tight between poles. A coffee mug waited in a kitchen window. A delivery cart lay tipped beside a market door. The town had kept its pose. People had fallen out of it. "Sector feels powered," Grant said. He was right. Strips of light still ran under awnings. Traffic markers blinked at intersections. The clinic sign glowed white through the rain. Tyler adjusted his mask. "Power for 3 weeks after evacuation. Someone kept the grid fed. We'll know why soon enough." I took us first to the school shelter, because that was what a rescue man does even after enough years in another trade. A settlement under threat gathers children, medicine, water, and frightened adults in one strong building. Hope still knows where to go, even when the rest of a town has gone quiet. The school doors stood open. Desks filled the gym. Fold-out cots lined the court in neat rows. Plastic ration crates sat stacked against the east wall. Rain beat on the roof. A cartoon sun smiled from a painted banner over the stage. The rations sat untouched. Owen and Leo swept the classrooms while Tyler checked the cots for any trace of recent use. Grant sent a crawler drone under the stage and through the crawl space. I stood in the center of the gym and listened to the building settle. Pipes ticked somewhere overhead. Water ran down a broken gutter outside. My own squad channel breathed in my ear. "Empty," Owen said. "Classroom's clear," Leo answered a moment later. Tyler lifted a blanket from one cot and frowned. "Dust film's light. Air handlers still moving some volume." "How long?" "Could be a day, could be weeks. Depends where the dust came from." Leo emerged from the far hall with a child's drawing pinched between 2 fingers. A house under a blue sky. 5 stick figures. Someone had pressed a gold star sticker onto one corner. He looked at it for a second, set it back on a desk, and closed the classroom door with more care than the hinge deserved. The place held only stillness. Dust, cots, and dark windows. Nothing else. The room looked paused. We cut through the attached clinic on the way back out. Same stillness, shorter and worse. Treatment bays prepared, cabinets open, saline bags hanging, monitors asleep. One gurney held a blood pressure cuff and a child's sock printed with cartoon rockets. Tyler stared at that sock for one beat too long. "Take it in," I said quietly. He looked at me, then nodded and stood. The square lay 3 blocks west. A church bell tower watched over the west rise. Freight hangars lined the south end of town near the shipping yard. The administration spire stood at center, 3 stories above the square with comm gear on top. Those 3 places pulled my eye. "Commander," Grant said. He pointed toward a storm drain beside the bakery. At first I took it for a length of white plastic caught under the grate. Then Tyler knelt and reached through with a gloved hand. He drew up a child's forearm bone as clean as something laid out for a lesson. A tiny punched metal tag had been wired through one end. Rain ran over it. Tyler turned it in his fingers. "Cut smooth at both joints," he said. "Cleaned after. Tag code looks industrial." Leo shifted his rifle toward the alley mouth. "You telling me someone did assembly line work on a kid?" Tyler met my eyes. This didn't happen in a panic. Owen looked south. "Hangars." We moved. The shipping yard sat behind a mesh gate with one panel bent inward. Cargo crawlers stood parked in ranks, tires gone soft. Loading crates waited under tarps drawn tight with strap hooks. A forklift rested where its driver had stepped off and never returned. Each machine wore a colony seal overpainted with occupation marks. Human work under alien rule. That was Golgotha in 1 yard. The big south hangar had its doors closed, power active in the lock, and a faint blue line at the threshold where cold air met rainwater. Tyler saw it too. Temperature control. Grant. He walked to the lock panel and plugged in. Someone likes old habits. Civilian freight software underneath. That means? Owen asked. It means whoever remade this place liked local shells. The doors parted in stages. Cold rushed out across my boots, rows, long rows reaching into shadow and white light. At first the shapes looked like freight frames. Then the details locked into place. Bones hung from hooks, each skeleton complete, cleaned to a pale shine, wired at the joints so the frame could hold it upright. Child, woman, man, small, tall, broad, thin. Every rack wore tags. Every lane between racks had floor markings and sorting posts. 100 skeletons stood in that first field of view, and there were more behind them, and more again, disappearing into the rear bays. Leo forgot to breathe for a second. Tyler closed his eyes once, opened them, and walked in among the racks with the care of a man stepping through a ward full of sleeping patients. I followed. Age groups sat in clusters. One bay held infants and young children, another held adolescents, another held grown labourers, bones thick at the wrist and shin. Many skulls carried neat punctures at the base. Some ribs showed fractures mended long before death. Some hands wore fresh breaks across the fingers. Each rack had a code strip with symbols for age, mass, muscle density, prior injury, resistance markers. One mark repeated beside many adult frames, a small burst icon beside the sternum. Panic signature, Tyler said. He had found a scanner head on a post and was reading the menu. Or fear response, something measured from tissue chemistry before cleaning. Before, Owen said. You keep saying before. Tyler ran a finger over one of the tags. Bodies moved through stages. Grant had drifted to the rear control booth. Power logs active. Conveyor use within the last 12 hours. Every head in the hangar turned his way. 12? I said. Give or take. Owen's face changed. He stopped looking at the bones as remains and started looking at the building as a threat. Then somebody's still here. Or the system cycle's on schedule, Grant said. Either way, we stop walking through it like tourists. He was right. Shock had stretched us open. I keyed the squad channel and put the town back into tactical language because men can stand inside horror longer when the nouns get practical. Owen, front security with Leo, Tyler with me. Grant, maps and control access. We search for current usage, power source, and any sign of captives. Fast hands, sharp corners. Tyler pointed toward the floor lanes at the rear of the hangar. There. Between the last two rack rows, metal shutters covered a broad trench in the concrete. Fresh scrape marks lined the edges. A motor housing sat in one wall with hydraulic pistons as thick as my arm. Tyler found the manual release. Owen and Leo took positions while the rest of us strained the wheel. The shutters rolled back. Below us ran a freight channel wide enough for 2 trucks side by side and deep enough to bury a house. Conveyor bands moved in separate lanes under strips of white worklight. One lane carried bone fragments through a water wash. Another moved sealed bins marked with organ glyphs. A third held long trays of pale rods and plates that resolved, piece by piece, into femurs, pelvises, and ribs. Mercy Crossing had been turned inside out. The trench walls bore old colony street names painted in yellow over brushed metal. Someone had built the processor under the town and used the town's own foundations to shape it. Grant crouched at a wall port and plugged in again. This line joins other tunnels: Plant, Storage, South Cradle, Central Spire, West Chapel. South Cradle? I asked. Landing system maybe, beacon hub, big thermal signature. Chapel? Heavy secure traffic and archive density. Owen looked down the moving lanes. People came through here in pieces, and you're still asking where the captives are. I let that sit for 1 second. We learn everything we can while we still have the window. Leo had taken the near junction by the trench ladder, rifle up, gaze cutting left and right along the lower lanes. The brass token flashed once between his fingers before he tucked it away and settled both hands on the weapon. Movement, he said. I turned in time to see a retrieval arm unfold from a recess above him. It snapped down with terrible speed. The lower hook punched through his side and out under the far ribs, lifting him clear of the floor before any of us fired. Owen shot the joint. Tyler fired with him. Metal burst from the housing. The arm jerked sideways, still holding Leo, and slammed him against the trench wall hard enough to crack bone over the machinery noise. His rifle spun away and vanished into the conveyor below. The brass token slipped from his glove, struck the lip of the trench and dropped after it. Then the arm hauled him into the dark recess overhead. Leo. Tyler ran for the ladder. I caught his vest and shoved him behind a support column as another arm punched down from the ceiling and stabbed at the space where his chest had been. Owen sprayed the motor block. Grant killed the trench lights with one hard command into the local port. White strips went black, leaving only red emergency bars along the lanes. The arm above us thrashed, dragging Leo deeper into the housing. Metal hit bone, then came a wet crack, then the grinding rush of a feed system engaging. Tyler stopped fighting me. He stared at the ceiling, and the look on his face told me he had already counted the injuries and found no place for a rescue. "Contact systems active," Grant said. "Security tagged us as stock or threat. Hard to tell." "Both," Owen said. Red light rolled over the skeleton racks. In that color they looked almost warm. I hated the thought. "We move," I said. "Move where?" Owen said. "We've got current activity, a dead man in the walls, and a whole town stacked on hooks." Grant pointed toward a side stair that climbed to the outer loading ramp and linked to the district above. "Spire gives me the best chance for a burst." I made the call. "Tower." Nobody argued further. Leo had settled that. We pulled back through the hangar, every shadow now a jointed arm in waiting. At the rear loading ramp I looked once toward the far bays and saw more than racks. Crates stood stacked under clear covers, each filled with sorted bones by type and size. Child skulls in one, hands in another, vertebrae in shallow trays marked with grading codes. A rancher's order applied to human remains. Rain hit us hard when we burst outside. The cold helped. Men breathe easier when there is sky above them, even on a world like Golgotha. Then I looked up at the quarantine pylons. Amber had shifted to white. The ring lights around the district were changing together, bright segment after bright segment, until the whole boundary burned in a circle around Mercy Crossing. Grant swore. Protocol state changed. "What does white mean?" Tyler asked. Grant was already working his pad. "Containment lane guidance, traffic clearance, sector access under special event authority." "Special event," Owen said. "That's a polite label for murder." The central spire rose 3 blocks north, past the market and the admin square. I could still imagine reaching it, forcing a burst out through whatever fog covered the town, and getting a fleet asset to erase Mercy Crossing before the next transport touched dirt. That hope had a shape. I started running toward it. The square speakers woke while we crossed the first intersection. A woman's voice broke through static and asked for help at Dock 2. Another voice cut over hers, a man telling somebody named Daniel to stay inside. Then a child called for her mother. The signals came from 3 directions at once. None of them matched the place. One line carried kitchen noise under the words. Another had wind over the mic. Archive fragments. "Ignore it," I said. "Keep eyes on corners." The voices kept coming as we moved block by block. Some came through wall units inside dark houses, some through street poles, some from tiny speakers mounted near locks or light fixtures. Grant grimaced as he ran. "They're building a sound net from every public address node in town." "For what?" Tyler asked. Owen answered first. For us. He was right. And the proof came 2 blocks later. Mason. The word came from the right side of the street, out of a row house with its front door half open. Erin's voice, clean enough to lift the hair on my neck under the collar seal, close enough to turn my head before I could stop it. Mason, I can't get this door. Same cadence she used when a cabinet jammed at home. Same mild anger under the words. Same low breath between syllables when she tried to stay calm. Owen caught my shoulder and shoved me forward before I could break stride. Sir! I ran. My chest had gone tight for a reason I could not fit into language yet. Erin was off-world. She had never set foot on Golgotha. The voice behind that door had reached into a place in my life only someone with access to my call records could know. Grant's face had gone pale under the rain. Local system is passing us. Voice match from squad archives, maybe. Personal traffic too, if they caught occupation intercept. A street pole ahead of us clicked. Erin's voice came again, now from higher up and farther off. Bring your own bones back. Tyler looked at me, then away fast. He had heard me say the line before. The machine had heard it too. The spire door stood shut with a colony seal and a welded brace. Owen cut the brace while Grant covered the street and I watched the second-floor windows. The sound net followed us into the building. Voices crawled through ceiling speakers and wall intercoms. Some begged. Some whispered coordinates. One man laughed like he had lost his mind 3 hours earlier and never found his way back. We took the stairs 2 at a time. Second floor, records. Third, comm relay. Grant hit the main cabinet with a bypass and brought up a local map while I climbed the narrow ladder to the rooftop platform. Wind struck me at the top, cold and sharp. Mercy Crossing spread beneath me in wet blocks and white perimeter fire. Beyond the settlement lay the dark plain and, farther off, the glow of other colony sectors under the clouds. I raised my optic toward the south horizon. At first I saw only weather. Then shapes grew out of it, smooth dark hulls descending in ordered lines, with their running lights masked, each ship silent enough that the eye found them before the ear. 6 on the first vector, more behind. They dropped toward the south flats where Grant's map marked the cradle. Huntercraft arriving when the beacons opened the lane. Mason, Grant called from below. I have uplink access for maybe a minute if the blocker sweep doesn't catch it. I dropped through the hatch. Send visuals from the hangar, current beacon state, inbound craft count, and one line clear enough that a drunk deckhand can understand it. Grant's fingers moved. Writing. Say it. He read as he keyed it in. Mercy Crossing is active harvest site. Quarantine is false cover. White beacon state marks incoming hunter arrival. Other settlements at risk. Immediate action required. Send. The cabinet whined. The building lights dimmed. Somewhere deep in the spire a breaker hit with a hard clap. Grant watched the transfer bar crawl. Come on. Owen guarded the stair door. Tyler stood at the window with his rifle aimed at the square below, where the speakers had switched to a woman singing an old church hymn in a ruined, stitched-together voice that skipped and reset every few bars. Partial out, Grant said. Data loss. I got a packet through, maybe enough to flag command. Maybe, Owen said. Good, we leave. Grant shook his head and dragged another layer over the map. Beacon arcs bloomed around Mercy Crossing, then fanned outward in a ring across the region. More sectors lit beyond the first ring, some active, some dormant. Each linked back to a processing spine. Mercy Crossing sat at the hub of a local cluster. Tyler leaned in. How many towns? Grant counted with one finger. 12 in direct range, maybe more if they chain it. That changed the mission. Mercy Crossing had been a tomb when we crossed the fence. Now it was a fuse. Control origin? I asked. Grant traced the signal paths. Spire routes outward. Core authority comes from Westchapel Undercroft. Thermal load, archive density, biometric access. They buried the real brain under the church. The hymn outside cut mid-line. Erin's voice flowed in through the ceiling speaker above us. Mason, come west. Owen put one round through the speaker. Plastic rained down. Your wife has bad timing, he said. I looked at the map, at the chapel block, at the outgoing beacon arcs, and made the choice that sealed the rest of the day. We go to the chapel. We pull proof strong enough to force fleet action, and we break whatever guides those ships onto the next towns. Owen looked at me as if measuring whether I had slipped. We got one man dead and a burst already sent. A burst with gaps, Grant said. He's right. This network will look like noise to anyone who wants an excuse to wait. Tyler closed his medkit. Then we get the proof. Owen had more to say. He packed it down. Fine, we go. Then we burn this place. The chapel stood on the west rise above Mercy Crossing, a stone and alloy building the first settlers had raised when the town was still hopeful enough to put beauty in public places. Coloured panels climbed the front face. A bronze Christ from old Earth hung over the doors, arms spread under rain. Occupation had left the shell mostly untouched. I understood why when we went inside. The main hall still held pews, hymnals, candles in glass, a half-finished mural of wheat and stars behind the altar. People protect sacred rooms long after the rest of life gets practical. A hunter learns that and uses it. Grant found the lower access behind the vestry. The door opened onto a freight lift sunk deep into the hill. Cold struck us the moment the doors parted. The undercroft below had the chill of storage and surgery mixed together into something worse. White light poured down long aisles lined with transparent cabinets, equipment bays and recording stations. Human organs floated in nutrient tanks. Bone sections stood mounted in teaching frames with damage tags hanging from wire loops. Preserved larynxes rested in gel sleeves beneath resonant cylinders and signal stacks. The room catalogued us. That's the voice net, Grant said, already moving to the consoles. Tissue driver, modulation stack, archive routing. Tyler stopped in front of the larynx racks, as if each step cost its own decision. They kept the throats, he said. At the center of the chamber, a curved glass wall enclosed tiered seating around a projection screen. Two figures stood inside. The first was taller than a man in armor by half a head, body balanced on backward-jointed legs with long feet built for spring and grip. Dark plated hide broke at pale seam lines along the ribs and neck where softer tissue moved beneath. Two long arms hung nearly to its knees. Folded hooks ran under each forearm. Its head sat low between raised shoulder ridges, narrow at the face with four black eyes set in a shallow arc. The second stood smaller and leaner beside it, same frame, less mass, one fresh burn mark streaked along the right flank. The screen played human combat footage, a farm compound. 3 settlers with rifles behind a tractor. One woman dragging a child toward a cellar hatch. Muzzle flashes. Dust. Then one of the hunters crossed the yard in 2 long bounds, struck the first man down, cut off the woman, pinned the third shooter with a thrown blade. Freeze frame. Symbols bloomed over the image. The larger hunter touched the younger one at the chest, then the head, then the frozen defenders on the screen. Training. My skin crawled under the armor. Mercy Crossing served as classroom and abattoir at once. Human settlements fed the ruling species in body and in sport, appetite, prestige, and skill. They raised their young on our last moments. Grant whispered from the console bank. Archive spans years, multiple sectors, multiple worlds maybe, indexed behavior sets, panic, concealment, barricade, maternal shielding, organized fallback, squad resistance. Owen's face went hard in a way I had seen only before breaching actions where civilians were already gone and vengeance had to wait behind the work. Plant charges now. In a minute. He swung toward me. What minute? You've seen enough. We need the archive. We've seen enough for any sane command. Any sane command, I said, would have bombed this place 3 weeks ago. That landed because it was true and because it hurt. Tyler hit playback on another file. A settlement square filled the screen. A militia line held behind sandbags. The camera tracked from above as one hunter cut power. Another flushed the defenders toward a lit avenue. and a third used human voices over public speakers to split a family group. Lesson marks overlaid the image, tied to movement and fear. Tyler shut it off so fast the screen cracked. Grant shoved a data block into the console. "Copying. Fast as I can." The larger hunter in the chamber turned. I did not know whether it heard us, saw our reflection, or caught Grant's copy attempt on its board. It moved with shocking speed for something built like that. One bound took it to the chamber door. The seal split open with a hiss. The smaller one sprang back behind it, low and eager. "Contact!" Owen fired first. Rounds struck the elder across chest and shoulder. It kept coming. Forearm hooks snapped out with a wet click and drove into Owen's rifle, wrenching it aside. I put 3 shots into the side of its head. One eye burst black. Tyler hit it with a cutter charge meant for thick tissue. Blue flame sheeted across its flank. It slammed into the glass wall, cracked it, and came again. At close range, it felt built for a world with stronger gravity and worse morals. It hit like a dropped engine. Owen went down under it. I rammed my rifle muzzle under the shoulder plate and emptied the magazine. Grant drew his sidearm and fired point blank into the neck seams. The elder convulsed, snapped one hook through my sleeve plate and died, still trying to pull me close enough to open. The juvenile had already moved. I saw it once at the chamber rear, body low, head turning toward me as if fixing my face in memory. Then it vanished through a service slot, too narrow for the elder. Red alarms rolled through the undercroft. Bulkhead lights changed. Somewhere above us, bells began to ring in the chapel tower and then cut into recorded voice bursts. Grant ripped the data block free. "Got a slice, enough to prove the pattern." "Charges," Owen said, getting to his feet with blood running from one ear where the elder had struck him. The floor locks boomed shut around us before he could move. Metal doors sealed the main aisles. The mimic wall woke at full output. "Mason," Erin said from the left bank. "Commander," said Leo from the right. "Grant, open the south lane," I said over them. He was already on it. "Biometric route changed. It knows us now." We had crossed from intruders into specimens. The facility was mapping itself around our behavior in real time. A maintenance hatch in the floor unlocked with a hard clack. Fresh path offered. I saw the logic at once. The system wanted us driven. Take it anyway. Owen looked ready to argue. Then Erin's voice came from every speaker in the room, soft and close, saying my name the way she had said it into my neck when I left for long tours. That was enough to make all of us move. The hatch opened onto catacomb lanes below the town, deeper than the freight trench under the hangar and far older in shape. Colony foundations, storm channels and service tunnels had been widened and plated into transport routes. Conveyor belts crossed under archways of original stone. Side gutters ran with pink fluid beneath clear lids. Bone dust drifted in the air and caught the work lights in pale streams. It coated the rails and our boots and the cuts in the floor like ground chalk. Grant brought up the copied map on his wrist screen while we moved. South lane to storage banks, then marrow plant, then cradle. Beacon spine sits above the cradle. There's a courier pod on the west gallery tied straight into the uplink, a one-seat maintenance shell for seasonal reports. If I can patch the archive into it, it can punch through the blocker haze and make orbit. "Can it carry a man?" Tyler asked. "If he sits on his sins and doesn't need room to breathe easy." "That'll do." The catacombs worked on more than our bodies. Every 20 yards a speaker or conduit port carried some new tailored voice. Grant heard a man cursing him by a name none of us knew. Tyler heard a woman from the clinic call for a crash cart. Owen heard his father telling him to keep his head down in a deer blind. The sounds came from side passages, maintenance tubes, dead conveyor lines, every dark mouth in the walls. The machine had learned each of us from our comms, our records, our reactions in the chapel, maybe from the first biosigns it scraped off us at the fence. It tested pressure points and watched which way we turned. I kept hearing Erin. Some lines were wrong in tiny ways. The shape of a vowel, a missing breath. The order of words turned inside out. Some were perfect. At a split in the lane, the right passage filled with her voice, close enough to make me stop. "Mason, door's jammed." That line had come from our kitchen 3 years earlier, when the overhead cabinet stuck after a heat swell. I had crossed the room and freed it while she laughed at me for going at a cheap hinge, like a breacher hitting enemy steel. The hunters had that memory. They had filed it under useful. Owen saw me looking right. "Sir." I forced my legs forward. "Left." Grant moved behind me, drone case half open, jaw set. "Signal booster ahead. If I can break local sync, I might kill some of the voice net." He reached it 3 minutes later. A waist-high node mounted beside an organ channel with colony conduit feeding occupation hardware. He knelt and opened the panel. His brother spoke from the passage behind him. Not through a ceiling speaker. Through a shoulder-height maintenance slit in the wall, with the grain and distance of a real man around a corner. "Grant, hey, Grant, I'm here." Grant froze. I saw the holiday card game again in my head. His tired grin, the way he said his mother still laid a plate for a son no one had found. "Don't," I said. The voice came again, quicker now, hurting. "Grant, please." He turned his head. Only that. 3 seconds of looking the wrong way. A cutter gate dropped from the ceiling between us with such speed the air cracked around it. The falling blade caught him from shoulder to hip and threw him into the organ trench. Before Tyler reached him, the trench rollers engaged and dragged him under a line of separating arms built for bodies already gone cold. Tyler lunged, got one hand on Grant's rig and took a slicing blow across the thigh from the first sorter blade. I hauled Tyler back by the harness while Owen emptied a magazine into the control housings. Grant's scream broke once and vanished under the trench. Something hard skidded free in the spray and struck my boot. One of Grant's cards, the Queen of Spades, bent down the middle. Tyler hit the floor hard. Blood spread under his leg seal where the blade had gone through the outer layer. Owen stood over the wrecked gate, chest heaving, face gone dark with fury. "That's 2 men bought with your proof." "Our proof," I said. He turned on me. "You want to own this route. Own all of it." I almost answered from anger. Anger wastes words. I crouched by Tyler instead. The cut ran deep, but missed the femoral bundle. He could still move if we bound it hard. "Talk to me." "Hurts," he said. "Still attached. Good sign." I wrapped the pressure band myself while he clenched a strap between his teeth. He yanked it free when I cinched the last loop. Grant's wrist screen had skidded out of the trench during the struggle. I picked it up. The copied map had auto-synced. A flashing cluster near the cradle marked incoming traffic. Another file stood open where he had last looked. A schedule table, settlement names, dates, cycles, processor loads, hunt party counts, 12 local towns. Mercy Crossing opened the season tonight. I showed Owen the screen. He read it and went still. "That's why we finish," I said. Tyler pushed himself up on one elbow. "How long till the first wave reaches those sectors?" I scanned the schedule. "Some tonight, some within 2 days." Owen rubbed blood from his cheek with the back of his glove. "Then we stopped the route." We planted our first charges at the marrow plant because it fed half the underground system. The place sat in a cavern under the old grain mill, centrifuge drums and cracking vats sunk into colonial foundations. Human vertebrae moved through wash channels toward grinders. Long, pale marrow rods rested in trays headed for cold storage. Tyler limped, but worked. Pain had tightened his face into a new man, one with room left only for the next task. Owen set shaped charges on drum bases. I walked the lane, tracing the load points that would force the widest collapse. Rage wanted all fire at once. Control mattered more. The storage banks came next, a frozen hall of stacked columns packed with sealed tissue pods. Age ranges, hormone spikes, disease flags, injury markers, stress profiles, food, study samples, trophies. They lived in the same cold taxonomy here. Tyler stared at a pod small enough to fit in 2 hands. "Set it," I said. He did. When we reached the south cradle access, the voices went quiet. That silence felt planned, too. The mimic net had learned that noise pushed us forward. Quiet invited thought. The cradle lay in a buried basin larger than a sports arena, open to the sky through armoured petals already beginning to split for incoming craft. Beacon towers ringed the basin, each throwing white guidance bars upward through the rain. Control galleries climbed the walls. Beneath grated catwalks ran fuel and power lines. At the far end sat the beacon core, a cluster of signal spines and coolant feeds built around an occupation engine sunk into the old colony freight pad. Halfway up the west gallery sat the courier pod Grant had marked on his map, a narrow one-seat shell latched into an uplink cradle. Thick cables ran from its spine into the beacon network. Manual launch rails pointed straight through a service tube toward open sky. Tyler followed my gaze. That pod can carry the archive and a man. One man if he seals it from inside, I said. Tight fit, fast burn. Owen scanned the upper galleries. You've got company. He meant more than ships. Lean, dark bodies flowed from access ports along the upper rails with the speed of hunting cats and the discipline of soldiers. I counted 4, then 6. Smaller than the elder in the chapel. Drones or younger hunters not yet trusted with the full work. We ducked into a service bay beneath the west gallery. Rain hissed through the widening petals above us. White beacon bars painted our armor in bands. Tyler sank against the wall and worked another blocker into his leg. I pulled Grant's data block from my pouch and slotted it into a portable reader. The training files opened where the chapel copy had left them. Human squads making final defensive stands in farmyards, loading docks, subway cuts, refinery towers. Lesson overlays tracked our habits. Wounded men fall back toward cover. Men shield the injured. Men protect the route of the one carrying the message. Men hold at choke points to let others withdraw. The younger hunter learns where honor and instinct shape us into predictable paths. I watched 3 clips in under a minute and saw the pattern. They think they know what we do next, I said. Owen glanced at the screen. They do. They know the shape, we give them the shape and pick the ground. He understood before Tyler did. Owen always saw combat geometry faster than anyone I had ever served with. You want to bait them down a kill lane? I want the juvenile too, I said. It saw me in the chapel. It's part of this season now. Tyler looked from one of us to the other. You can tell which one is the kid? Right neck seam. Burn scar on the flank. Owen nodded once. Route? I pointed at the map. Gallery stairs to separator floor. Conduit trench under beacon 2. I've already primed charges there and on the coolant couplers. Tyler gets the archive into the pod and launches. You hold the lower choke until he's clear. Tyler shook his head. You need a man on the pod while it warms. You can still work aboard. I can still shoot. You can do both for 1 minute, that's all I need. The argument with Owen came then because it had been building since the school gym, and there was no room left to carry it unspoken. You keep making the mission bigger, he said, voice low so Tyler could work. Every time we find a fresh circle of hell, you decide we have to reach the center. We found the center 3 times and it kept going. We had enough to warn command from the tower. We had a broken packet. We had a chance to walk out with 2 men alive. The words hit because they named Tyler and me as if the equation were already solved. I met Owen's stare and gave him the truth he deserved. Leo died because I kept us inside after the hangar. Grant died because I kept us inside after the tower. I know exactly where those names sit. I still choose this. Tyler looked up from the pod access panel. The pain had stripped everything extra from his face. Then let's make the choice count. That settled it. The lesser hunters reached us first, gliding along the gallery rails in pairs. Owen dropped the lead 2 with controlled bursts to the head seams, while I cut the lights on our bay and shifted right. Tyler crawled into the pod alcove and started the uplink handshake with the archive block patched into the spine. One drone made the mistake of jumping down into the bay. Up close it looked half-grown, all tendon and edge, designed for pursuit over finish work. Owen blew out one knee joint. I stepped in and put a round through the eye cluster before it could rise. Black fluid splashed across the deck grating and ran through the slots below. More movement on the upper rail. Then the juvenile came into view. Same long body as the one in the chapel. Same right neck seam, fresh burn scar along the flank. It paused above us, head tilted, learning my shape again. "Tyler?" I called. "Uploading. Time. 40 seconds. Maybe more." Owen leaned out, fired up at the gallery, and drew return motion from the drones. "Then by 40. He took the lower choke exactly as the training files said a human veteran would. Rifle braced on the conduit lip, body angled to cover our pullback route, leaving his own left side open where speed mattered more than armor. He chose it because it was the right place to stand. They expected it because men like us had been dying in patterns long enough for someone to build a school from the footage. The juvenile dropped from the rail and landed outside Owen's lane, too fast for a clean shot. Owen pivoted and fired. The first 2 rounds missed. The third struck the scar and made the hunter lurch. A drone came over the lip behind Owen and drove a blade into his side under the arm. Owen swung the rifle butt, crushed the drone's head ridge, and kept shooting while blood ran dark down his suit. "Go!" His voice broke against the steel. I grabbed Tyler by the rig and hauled him toward the pod. He shoved me back out with surprising strength. "Your route," he said. "I launch this, then I burn. Seal after send. Punch clear the second you have sky. Mason." He looked at me with something close to apology. "Bring your own bones back." Hearing Erin's line from Tyler almost broke me because it carried human care, not the machine's theft. I slapped the pod frame once and turned. Owen was still upright. The juvenile had backed off from his fire and was circling for angle while 2 drones pressed the choke. I ran left along the gallery stairs, making sure the hunters saw me. One burst from my rifle clipped a drone's shoulder and showered sparks from the rail. Then I showed them exactly what the training files promised. A commander withdrawing toward the beacon core while the wounded courier made for escape. The juvenile took the bait at once. It sprang after me across the separator floor, long feet barely touching metal. An older, heavier hunter followed more carefully through the glare and steam, using cover. I needed both on the line. Behind me, the courier pod engines rose in pitch. Tyler had the archive out. A second later, the whole cradle filled with sound as the beacon spine overrode local traffic and pushed our burst through every open channel in range. My own voice boomed from the towers above the basin, rough with static and harder than I remembered it sounding. "This is Commander Mason Cole, Colonial Special Operations, transmitting from Mercy Crossing on Golgotha. Quarantine is cover for active human harvest and organized hunt operations. 12 settlements in the local ring face immediate threat. Break beacon lines, evacuate family units, go to ground. Avoid public shelters and lit avenues. Do not answer familiar voices over comm or street systems. I repeat." The message rolled on above the cradle while I ran. The hunters heard it too. The elder hissed a command to the juvenile in clipped throat clicks and chest knocks. Language stripped to pursuit. Then Erin answered over the speakers. "Mason, stop running!" The mimic had her completely now. Tone, breath, impatience. The slight lift on my name when she wanted me to listen. It used her voice to say things she would never say. I hit the conduit trench under Beacon 2 and slid into cover behind a coolant manifold. 2 charges sat where I had primed them earlier, one on the separator supports, one on the beacon line couplers. The main core sat 30 yards beyond under a shell of ribbed plating and white heat. A service shaft marked North Access climbed from a catwalk on the far side. The juvenile landed first, exactly where the files taught it. A human officer would make his last stand, near narrow cover, route to one side, core behind him. Status kill, clean line for the elder to watch. I put 3 rounds into its chest seam and 1 into the right eye. It shrieked and lunged. The Elder came low from my left, smarter, using the manifold for cover. I hit the first detonator. The separator floor dropped out beneath the juvenile in a blast of shattered grating and white coolant vapor. It fell into the running cutter bed below. For 1 second, its upper body stayed above the edge, forearms clawing for purchase, hooks biting metal. Then the blades engaged. One arm spun away. The body slammed sideways into the grinder teeth and vanished in red-black spray and crushed armor plate. The Elder cleared the blast with a bound that carried it halfway across the trench. It struck me in the shoulder and drove me against the beacon housing hard enough to blur my vision. One hook punched through the outer plate of my chest armor and stopped there, grinding for depth. Its ruined face from the chapel kill glistened in the light. One black eye left. One side of the jaw torn open to show pale working cords beneath. I jammed my sidearm under the torn jaw and fired until the slide locked. The Elder convulsed and sagged over me, dead weight pinning me to the housing. Behind us, the courier pod launched. It tore free of the west cradle in a blast of sparks and white flame, shot up the service tube, and punched through the petals into the rain-dark sky. Tyler had made it clear. At the lower choke, Owen saw it too. He turned his head once toward the flare. Then 3 drones hit him at once. He killed one with a point-blank burst and jammed his last breaching charge into the conduit lip with his free hand. I saw his mouth move. Could have been a curse. Could have been my name. Then the charge blew. The lower choke folded inward in a burst of fire and broken rail. 2 drones went with it. Owen disappeared under steel, flame, and falling conduit. There was nothing uncertain left in it. I shoved the Elder off and staggered upright. Across the basin, the cradle had become a war of alarms, white guidance bars, burning drone parts, and the long climbing howl of systems failing in sequence. I could still see the north service shaft beyond the core. The route existed. Then 3 more dark hulls broke through the clouds above the cradle. Fresh craft descending on white guidance bars still burning from the beacon heart. Partial damage would leave this processor alive, and the season intact. Another crew could land, reroute the lines, salvage the surviving archive, and touch the next town before command finished arguing over my first packet. I looked at the core. Coolant feeds still ran. Guidance spines still cast their bars into the rain. The heart of the system still beat. The second detonator would cripple the couplers. It would not stop the engine. Grant's copied schematics came back to me in fragments. Remote override protected, emergency collapse requires local manual lockout, coolant return valves hand closed at the housing, overload switch dead unless held at the core itself through climb. No clean retreat from that. The shaft on the far side would still be there for a few seconds, not for the whole sequence. My choices had spent Leo, Grant, and Owen. Tyler's pod had one chance to get clear. I could not make those deaths small by surviving the part only I could finish. I keyed the squad net. Static rolled. Then, thin and cracked by distance, Tyler answered. Pod clear. Archive sent. He said my name. I heard the question inside it. Listen, I said, you make orbit. You tell them Mercy Crossing was the first gate. You tell them to cut every white beacon they see. You tell them the hunters teach their young on our last stands, so change the script wherever you can. Mason, where are you? At the core. A pause, then his voice dropped. You still have a shaft on the north side. You can make it. He was lying for me. Medics do that sometimes. They learn when truth helps and when it only adds weight. Not after lockout, I said. This part needs hands. Through the static, I heard him hit something in the pod, maybe a panel, maybe his own leg. Damn you. Then another voice broke across the channel, weak with lag and distance and a rawness that told me the signal had fought hard to reach me. Mason? Erin. Real this time. Not perfect. Carried on a tearing signal through atmosphere and the hole Tyler's launch had punched open. I knew her at once. I'm here, I said. Warning got out. Colony net picked it up. They're moving people. Those words reached the deepest part of me, because they answered the only question that still mattered. Rain fell through the open petals and struck the beacon housing around me. Fire climbed somewhere under the cradle where the marrow plant had gone up. Secondary blasts ran beneath the town in thudding waves. Mercy Crossing was coming apart from the foundations upward. Erin's voice shook. "Come home!" I flipped the core switch cover and looked once across the basin where Owen had vanished under the collapsed choke, and where the dead elder sprawled near my boots, and where the white bars still stretched into the sky for the next wave of ships. "I'm sending what I've got," I told her. The overload procedure had 6 steps. Grant would have done them faster. I did them one by one with blood in my glove and my left hand going numb inside the wrecked armor. Manual lockout on the coolant return. Reserve shunt from the lower plant into the beacon heart. Guidance spines forced into thermal climb. Fail-safe relay fused open. Core shell vent dampers sealed. Deadman hold engaged. Warning glyphs burst across the panel. Pressure values jumped. The engine beneath the pad began to shake the whole structure. Erin stayed on the line while I worked. She said my name twice. She said she had heard my broadcast before fleet sensors could choke it. She said Nora would get her ceremony, and the story told about her uncle would be the truth. She said home waited, even when men like me kept treating it like a place on a later map. I wanted to answer all of that with something better than the few words left in me. The core took those words instead. It climbed toward failure with a rising note that shook my teeth through the collar seal. Above the cradle, the fresh craft started to bank away when their approach lines bent. Too late for them. I set the last charge on the main housing and wedged it under the access seam with my knife. My wrist detonator showed the plant and storage banks already gone hot beneath half the district. One switch left. I sat down with my back against the core because my legs had reached their end without asking permission. The rain on my face felt cold and honest. Through the opening above the cradle, I could see a slice of Golgotha's sky, dark cloud and failing white bars, and one fleeing pod already so high it looked like a spark. "Erin, I'm here. Bring my bones home if there are any." She made a sound halfway between a laugh and a broken cry. "You stubborn bastard." "That too." The core hit runaway. Light burst through the seam lines around the housing, fierce enough to carve shadows from the catwalks. The guidance bars twisted, bent inward, and snapped. Across Mercy Crossing, every white beacon in the ring surged bright in one final flare. Then the buried tanks began to go. The blast lifted me and the dead elder, and the whole cradle floor in the same instant. Steel tore. Stone split. The town folded into itself from the tunnels upward, as the marrow lines, storage banks and signal spines all found fire together. For one impossible second I saw Mercy crossing whole in a frame of white and red. Church tower, market street, school roof, hangars, every place where people had once cooked breakfast and folded laundry and sent children to class. Then the processor beneath it opened its jaws and the settlement dropped into the furnace it had hidden. The sound vanished before the light did. That last part pleased me. The hunters had built a world from our cries, our final calls, our private words stolen and sorted and fed back to us. I left them a silence large enough to bury the lesson.